Halo, ini Liska dan ini informasi mengenai Tax Reformation in Indonesia.
In Indonesia, tax reformation has been a crucial aspect of the government's strategy to improve revenue collection, enhance compliance, and support economic growth. This overview provides a detailed analysis of tax reformation in Indonesia, covering its background, objectives, key initiatives, challenges, and the impact on the economy. Background of tax reformation in Indonesia. Indonesia's tax system has undergone various changes since the country's independence in 1945. Over the years, tax reforms have been implemented to improve the efficiency of tax collection and ensure that the tax system supports economic growth and social development. The government's tax to GDP ratio has historically been low compared to other countries in the region, indicating a need for reform. A key turning point was in 1983 when Indonesia launched a major tax reform to shift from a simple tax system to a more structured one, introducing income tax and value added tax, V8s. Objectives of tax reformation. The primary objectives of tax reformation in Indonesia are 1. Increasing tax revenue. One of the main goals is to increase the tax to GDP ratio, which has been relatively low. By broadening the tax base and improving compliance, the government aims to generate more revenue to fund public services and development projects. 2. Improving tax compliance. Tax reform seeks to reduce tax evasion and avoidance. This involves implementing measures to make tax payment easier and more transparent, encouraging both individuals and businesses to comply with tax regulations. 3. Economic growth support. Tax reform aims to create a more business-friendly environment. By simplifying the tax system and reducing the tax burden on certain sectors, the government hopes to stimulate investment and economic growth. 4. Enhancing fairness and equity. Ensuring that the tax burden is distributed fairly among taxpayers is another objective. This means that those with higher income should pay a proportionately higher amount of tax. 5. Reducing bureaucracy. Simplifying tax administration and reducing red tape is essential to make the tax system more efficient. This can help in reducing the cost of compliance for taxpayers and improving the ease of doing business. Key tax reform initiatives. 1. Tax amnesty programs. Indonesia has introduced tax amnesty programs to encourage taxpayers to disclose previously undeclared assets. The first significant tax amnesty program was launched in 2016, allowing taxpayers to pay a fee in exchange for immunity from prosecution for past tax evasion. This program was successful in increasing tax compliance and bringing previously untaxed wealth into the formal economy. 2. Modernization of tax administration. The government has invested in modernizing the tax administration system, including the use of technology. The implementation of an electronic filing system, e-filing, for tax returns and electronic payment systems, e-payment, has made it easier for taxpayers to comply with tax obligations. Introduction of new taxes. To diversify revenue sources, Indonesia has introduced new types of taxes. For example, in 2020, the government introduced a tax on digital services provided by foreign digital companies. This reflects a global trend towards taxing the digital economy. 4. Revision of tax laws. Indonesia has undertaken revisions of its tax laws to align with international standards and practices. Changes include the reduction of the corporate income tax rate from 25% to 22% in 2020, with a further reduction to 20% planned in subsequent years. These revisions are intended to make Indonesia more competitive and attractive to investors. 5. Broadening the tax base. Efforts have been made to expand the tax base by identifying new sources of tax revenue and reducing exemptions and deductions. This includes bringing the informal sector into the tax net and improving data collection to identify potential taxpayers. Challenges of tax reformation. 1. Compliance and enforcement. Despite efforts to improve compliance, tax evasion remains a challenge. Many individuals and businesses continue to underreport income or engage in tax avoidance schemes. Strengthening enforcement mechanisms and ensuring that tax laws are effectively implemented is crucial. 2. Public awareness and education. There is a need for greater public awareness and understanding of tax obligations. Taxpayer education programs are essential to encourage voluntary compliance and change the perception that tax payment is a burden. 3. Corruption and bureaucracy. Corruption within the tax administration can undermine reform efforts. Reducing corruption and streamlining bureaucratic processes are necessary to ensure that tax reforms are effective. 4. Economic conditions. Economic downturns can affect tax revenues and the ability to implement reforms. For instance, the COVID-19 pandemic led to reduced economic activity, which impacted tax collections and required adjustments to tax policies to support businesses and individuals. 5. Technological infrastructure. While technology can improve tax administration, it also requires significant investment in infrastructure and cybersecurity. Ensuring that the tax administration system is secure and can handle increased digital transactions is essential. Impact of tax reformation. 1. Increased tax revenue. Tax reforms have led to an increase in tax revenues, which are crucial for funding public services and infrastructure projects. The tax amnesty program, in particular, has been successful in generating additional revenue. 2. Improved compliance. The modernization of tax administration and the introduction of digital systems have made it easier for taxpayers to comply with tax obligations. This has led to improved tax compliance rates. 3. Economic growth. By creating a more business-friendly environment and reducing the tax burden on certain sectors, tax reform has supported economic growth. Lower corporate tax rates have made Indonesia more attractive to investors. 4. Greater transparency and fairness. Tax reforms have contributed to greater transparency in the tax system and ensured that the tax burden is distributed more fairly. This has helped to build trust in the tax system. 5. Challenges remain. Despite the progress made, challenges remain in achieving the full potential of tax reforms. Continued efforts are needed to address issues such as tax evasion, corruption, and public awareness. Conclusion. Tax reformation in Indonesia is a critical component of the government's strategy to enhance revenue collection, improve compliance, and support economic development. Through various initiatives, including tax amnesty programs, modernization of tax administration, and revisions of tax laws, Indonesia has made significant progress. However, challenges such as compliance, corruption, and economic conditions must be addressed to ensure the success of tax reform. The ongoing commitment to reform is essential for achieving a fair, efficient, and effective tax system that supports Indonesia's long-term development goals.